In honor of Lego Star Wars Rebuild the Galaxy, we're asking, what if? I'm Candace, and with me is Arzu. Hey, Arzu.
Hello.
Yes, so I love the idea of Star Wars what ifs. So there was actually a Marvel comic series for Star Wars called Infinities, which was like, what if Luke didn't make the shot in the Death Star? And like
Right.
Princess Leia gets captured, and then all of a sudden she's Vader's right hand apprentice person. And and then like Empire Strikes Back is like, what if Luke just didn't make it when he was alone on Hoth? And
I I feel like men will call this what if and women will call this fan fiction. You
yeah,
know what I
that's
mean?
very much it. This is what we have been doing for years. There's a really good fanfic that I love on Archive of Our Own. It's not complete, but it's like, what if after The Force Awakens, Leia goes back in time and she's aboard the Death Star in A New Hope,
Okay.
and she just like tells Vader like, "I'm your daughter," and it's like it goes from there. Like, what does she
Okay.
do with all the information she has? And like, it's so good. I'll find the link or something. So good. It's so well written too. Still, Vader's alive, and then, like, her parents are alive too, and it's just, like, weird.
That tension.
Yeah, tension. I love family drama when it's not my family.
Oh my god.
Speaking of drama, the what if I wish to discuss with you today is, what if Rey took Kylo's hand in The Last Jedi? Because there's this moment where he asks her to join him, and there's a hesitation, right?
Yes.
And I know this is like, if you know me, you're like, Candace, what are you doing? You're asking a Raylo this question.
Yeah.
Why are you doing this to yourself? And I'm like, because I respect Raylos and they deserve a chance to speak.
And
Speak,
like join
Arzu.
the dark side. Look, okay, first of all, we've been speaking. So before I answer this, I'm gonna preface this to say that there are tens of thousands of Reylo fics on AO3, and a bunch of them deal with exactly the question of like
Oh,
what if.
really? Okay, that makes sense.
So many deal with it because this is, like, such a big question, right? Like, what would have been different if she had taken his hand? And I also wanna say we've been speaking because I'm facing my bookshelf. If you're not watching the video, you don't see this, but I'm facing my bookshelves, and I can see from here, like, 10 books that used to be fanfic, and that are now sitting
Raylo
published.
fanfic.
Reylo fanfic, and are now sitting published and bound on my shelf. But let's play this out. Like, what do I think would have happened if she had taken his hand? Because I guess that's the question. Because what if it could have been anything? But I feel like the simplest way to put this is I feel like she would have taken his hand. It would have devastated the resistance. They would have been like, she's fallen, he's taken her. They probably wouldn't have thought that she did it by choice. They'd probably think she was being held there. And I think she would have been going to great length to sort of show him the way to the light while he's trying to pull her to the dark. And they probably this could have gone in any direction. They could have met somewhere in the middle. I hate the term gray Jedi, but like a balanced Jedi. They could have probably met somewhere in the middle, but it wouldn't have come without, upending the first order. So that's probably where that united front would have come in. Is because Kylo ends this thing the supreme leader. So then it would have been him. Everybody's just listening to me like puzzle this out in real time. It would have been he would have been supreme leader, and she would have been his like apprentice on the Sith side of not even Sith, like on the dark side of things. But then it would have been like if you read the High Republic and you're caught up on Phase 3, spoilers if you're not, Marcian Ro has now found himself in a position where he's like in charge of an entire sector of the galaxy, and he like really didn't want to be. And I feel like if Kylo had been kind of allowed to play out the Supreme Leader thing, having gotten what he wanted with Rey by his side, he probably would have felt the same, and that he is now having all this authority that he didn't want. He would have accepted the role of Supreme Leader, but it would have been more about keeping Hux at bay and kind of being able to have free reign to do whatever he wants, while other people are running the galaxy. Meanwhile, Rey has fallen under this apprenticeship thing, which, yes, she came to Kylo, she took his hand, like, just sort of try to bring him back to the light, but there is a ton about the Force that he learned in Jedi school that he kinda learned coming up through it that Rey doesn't know. And, like, she has some of it intuitively, but she probably would have gotten a lot of, like, constructive information from him. and maybe kind of gone along with it for a bit and then sort of used his own lessons against him to try to make him turn. Now that where it gets interesting for me, like what I would have liked to see in like 9, however they did it, whether or not she took his hand, was in an effort to bring him back to the light and to kind of embrace his ways and accept the dark side in this way. If she had started to fall like to the dark and then he's thinking that this is all he wanted, but then realizing like this isn't actually at all what I wanted. And this is awful. And then it becomes about him trying to pull her back and they sort of save each other in that way. I don't know if that's like what if that happened, but that's what I would have liked to see happen because I think Rey as a character has such potential for darkness. Like there is so much about her that is so messed up because she was like, I'm choosing to disregard like the last third of her story, but like she was sold as a baby. So okay, so one of the big part of this what if is Rey Palpatine is not a thing.
Okay, well, see,
That's not
the
a thing.
thing is with what ifs, we have to work in the constraints of it.
But if she had taken his hand at that point, then the Rise of Skywalker isn't a thing.
But Palpatine's still out there.
No, he's not.
Yes, he is.
There's no indication of Palpatine until the Rise of Skywalker. It doesn't come up in this at all.
I'm just saying, if we're saying this one thing changes in in the galaxy the way it is with those 3 movies, even if she takes his hand,
But it
Palpatine's
doesn't.
still out there.
But if all of this changes, then the events of that movie never happen. So I can disregard that.
No, but I'm
Yes,
saying if I don't know, like,
because like
if how you turn left or right, it's not gonna affect you.
right. But if we're changing the story from that point onward, then I can disregard the terrible stuff that came after because all of that falls apart.
But
All
you
of it
have
falls
to
apart.
but you have to, like, work within these
I am
constraints, like,
working within the constraints of everything that comes before that moment.
but it also has to include what happens in the galaxy next.
No, it doesn't.
Yes, it does.
Because nothing no, because if you turn right or left, that doesn't make an impact on the galaxy as a whole. The hero of the resistance opting to go work with the dark side changes the fate of the galaxy.
Okay, but in Rise of Skywalker, which I know we don't wanna go through,
That's not a real movie.
Palpatine was there the entire time. It was Palpatine all along.
No, it wasn't. That's what the Palpatine wasn't in The Rise of Skywalker until they did reshoots. He wasn't even there when they wrote the script. Listen, I'm trying to make this coherent. If you want it to be nonsense, I'll incorporate Palpatine.
Okay, let me ask the question, what if? What if Rey took his hand and Palpatine's like, "Hey, I'm your granddaddy, what's up?" What do you think would happen?
I would turn the movie off. Think it that what if, that what if is a whole separate question. If you want the Palpatine thing to make sense to Rey at this junction of her story, that needed to come in earlier, and it didn't. Like it just did. It doesn't make sense. So I don't know how to incorporate that into my what if because even now it is fundamentally illogical. It doesn't make sense. Candace is like, this was a terrible idea.
This is a mistake. Okay, what do you think Leia would think? Or Leia would
Rey.
do?
I
Yeah.
think Leia is the I like that you're just like, we're shutting that down.
I
I want to finish my points about Rey.
Oh,
Then
go
I'll
ahead.
answer the Leia question.
Okay.
So my point about Rey is what her knowledge in the headspace in that moment, whatever nonsense came after, is as far as she knows, like she has been abandoned, she's been sold, she's been living on her own for 15, 20 years. She has such incredible capacity for darkness, and there's like this inherent good in her that kind of keeps her back. Like the moment where Ankara Plutt wants to buy BB-8 and he's ready to give her like months worth of food. And she's this close to taking it. And then that goodness wins out in the end. And she opts not to. So that's who Rey is at her core. So I think that if she was allowed to kind of lean into the dark a bit more, that there is a risk of that eroding some of that goodness if that's all she's exposed to, and then that pushing her further to the dark in a way that, like, she wouldn't want and that Kylo had never intended. So I think that would have probably come up at some point. So that's what I'm gonna say about Rey. Now let me answer your question about Leia. I think Leia is the only one who would think there was, like, something to it, and that she wasn't just, like didn't just have, like, a bag thrown over her head and she was hauled onto, like, the
Well,
supremacy or whatever the ship's called.
wouldn't Chewie be like, "Hey, I shipped her. Like, I
Chewie
accept
would have
her."
been like Chewie would have been like, "That girl busted out the Maybelline, she did her skincare, she changed her clothes and FedExed herself over. Like, chill, it's fine." And I think, like, with that knowledge from Chewie, I think Leia's the only one who wouldn't be worried. Like, Poe and Finn would wanna, like actually, not even really Poe, 'cause they haven't met yet. Like, Finn would have wanted to go in guns a-blazing, Poe would have been right behind him, but, like, Leia would be like, "Guys, it's fine, she's got this." And I think it gradually would have like, they would have gradually realized that she don't got this, and it's kind of, like, escalating, and then that's when the story kinda culminates.
Okay.
Yeah. Candace was like, "We're never doing this is a mistake. You and so what would happen if she took it? So I'm only taking those 2 movies. You did not put the" for the record to anybody listening, and Candace is gonna cut this out, so I don't know if you're gonna hear this or not, but for the record, for anybody listening, I was not given those canon constraints until you heard her give them to me. That was the
I
first time I was hearing it.
I thought it went without saying, but I'm gonna have to say it when I do this again with hopefully
Because my
less
basis for
unhinged
this
people.
my basis for this is Marvel's What If, which, like, timelines are not a thing, like, it doesn't necessarily respect the canon of the movies that come after because the whole idea of things changing that early in the timeline, everything is fundamentally different.
So, for
So that
in
was my
Star Wars
basis for it.
in Star Wars Affinities, Luke doesn't make the shot, the Death Star, he's him and Han, they are able to run away, still on Dagobah. So, they go to Yoda because Ben tells him, "Go to Dagobah," his little, ghost voice. And he goes and trains in Dagobah. So, Yoda's still in Dagobah. What he did there doesn't change the fact that Yoda is there, you know?
Okay, but that to me is different because that's, like, a different plot beat, whereas somehow Palpatine returned, like, undermines the point that got them to the throne room in the first place. It undermines the entire conversation they have. It undermines
Oh,
mostly Rey's character arc.
but I'm gonna say something really mean. It happened.
It didn't, though. Okay, it happened, but because this is my made up what if scenario, it didn't happen.
Okay. Spoilers for Star Wars Infinity, A New Hope. Yoda is able to take like the pilot seat of the Death Star and just crashes it straight into Coruscant into the Emperor.
Okay.
I don't know. I think that's awesome.
I'm
Like,
like,
I just think it's cool.
it is
He's
very
like,
cool. But because Yoda's a little chaotic gremlin, I don't think him piloting the Death Star into a planet undermines anything about him. I'm like, frankly, I'm surprised this is the first time you tried that.
I mean, there's a lot of innocent people in Coruscant,
Yeah, that's
right?
not great. But also, granted, this came, 50 years later, but spoilers for the High Republic Phase 2, Yoda saw a really big bad thing happening to a bunch of people and went, we don't need to keep that in the archives. We can just delete that. And then 100 years later, people are suffering the consequences of that. Yoda's
Not the
kind of
best decision
problematic.
maker.
He's
Not the
kind of
best decision
problematic,
maker.
actually.
I mean,
Why is he
we
in charge?
learned
He shouldn't be.
we're right after episode 5 of the Acolyte, and we're like, yo, could have done some stuff.
Okay, let me tell you real quick. I haven't seen episode 6, 7, and 8, but you want to know what would happen if Rey took Kylo's hand? You need to just follow Osha and Chimera, and that's probably what would have happened. Probably. I don't know that for sure, but
We
seems
don't know
like
what's
a
gonna
pretty
happen.
good bet. You're like, that's enough. That's enough.
I apologize. I knew it was gonna go off the rails, I just didn't know to what degree.
If you want to ask me what if Rey was a Palpatine from the beginning, I can come up with something pretty compelling for that. I don't think she was a Palpatine from the beginning. I mean, like, for real, like, with a competent writer. And you can keep that in the episode. I would tell him that to his face.
On that note, thank you for listening/watching. This is Space Waffles. May the waffles be with you.
Bye.